In a bustling city with dusty streets lived a young girl named Aminata, heir to a powerful family. Her house, imposing and well-decorated, stood like a beacon of wealth and authority. But behind its thick walls, Aminata felt like a prisoner, captured by the strict rules of her parents, Fatoumata and Omar. Fatoumata, her mother, was a respected woman in the community. She wore clothes of discreet elegance, but her piercing and authoritative gaze made her feared. Omar, her father, a man of rigid principles, imposed strict discipline. Their family's reputation was all that mattered to them, and Aminata was its hostage. She could not go out without being watched, her friends were limited, and her world was reduced to school and home. At school, she wore a mask of tranquility, but deep inside, a silent revolution beat in her heart. Every morning, before the sun rose, she was awakened for her studies, with the constant pressure to meet her parents' expectations. But that morning, something changed. It was an ordinary day, a day when she felt particularly oppressed by her reality. She went to school as usual, but something urged her to take a break. That's when she noticed a familiar figure, Amina, a student from her school, but above all, a free soul. Amina, unlike Aminata, lived her life without the constant fear of rules and expectations. She was not from the same social background as Aminata, but her freedom of expression, her radiant smile, and her lively spirit were traits Aminata secretly admired. "Why are you always alone, Aminata?" Amina asked, a spark of curiosity in her eyes. Aminata lowered her head, a slight smile forming on her lips. "I can't really go out. My parents don't let me have friends," she replied in a barely audible voice. Amina laughed, shaking her head. "You're a wonderful person. Why limit yourself like this? Let me take you with us today. Just a moment of freedom. No rules." Aminata hesitated. She knew her parents would hate the idea, but Amina had this magnetic pull, this energy. It was as if she offered a key to a world Aminata had never dared to imagine. And she gave in. She followed Amina, without thinking any further. As the days passed, Aminata slowly integrated into Amina's group of girls. Every afternoon after school, they met in a quiet corner of the park, far from the watchful eyes of adults. There, Aminata finally felt like she existed, without being constantly observed. She laughed, told stories, and for the first time, she felt free. The weight of her parents' expectations slowly faded with each moment spent with Amina and the others. One day, after school, Amina proposed something daring. "There's a party this weekend. It's a chance for you to go out and enjoy yourself a little. Don't worry, we'll help convince your parents. We'll cover for you." Aminata froze. "A party? But my parents..." "Don't worry. We'll handle everything. It's just one evening. You deserve this. No one will know." Adrenaline rushed through her. For once, she felt alive, ready to break the rules. She accepted the invitation, aware that this decision could change her life. The weekend arrived quickly. In secret, Aminata slipped a fake letter into her father's hands. He read it quickly, and without asking many questions, he nodded. "All right, if the school has approved it, you can go. But be careful." She couldn't believe her eyes. Freedom was finally within her reach. On the night of the party, Aminata arrived at a place her parents would have despised. Flashing lights, loud music, laughter, and conversations, everything overwhelmed her. She felt like a stranger in this world, but also like a completely new person, ready to explore a different life. That's when a boy caught her attention. Boubacar, a young man from the group, looked at her with gentle curiosity. He had an intense yet kind gaze, and his presence radiated warmth. He slowly approached Aminata, sensing her shyness. "You seem a bit isolated. Are you okay?" he asked, a reassuring smile on his lips. Aminata blushed. I'm not used to being here. Everything is new to me." "You don't have to apologize," Boubacar replied. "Everyone here is just having fun. Enjoy the moment." They started talking, slowly at first, but as the conversation progressed, Aminata felt more at ease. He asked her questions, made her laugh, made her feel seen, heard, appreciated. This evening became more than just an event. It was a moment where Aminata felt recognized for who she truly was, far from her parents' judgments. At the end of the night, as they stood side by side, Boubacar looked at her, and their hands brushed against each other. Aminata felt a shiver run through her body. What she hadn't anticipated was the intensity of her feelings. She knew this encounter would change her life forever. But this transformation wouldn't only bring good things. Risky choices would soon present themselves to her. The next day, as she returned home, her mind was racing. She couldn't stop thinking about Boubacar, about what he represented, about the freedom he had given her. She knew that this new chapter of her life, this adventure, could be the most beautiful, but also the most dangerous. The morning after the party, Aminata woke up with a mix of excitement and guilt. Everything that had happened the night before felt unreal. The sound of her parents moving around the house pulled her out of her thoughts. They were not yet aware of her secret night out. Her hands trembled slightly, but she knew she had to stay strong. This little secret was now the weight she carried. Breakfast was silent. Fatoumata, her mother, sat at the table, her eyes scanning her plate as if she could read her daughter's mind. Omer, her father, at the other end of the table, seemed focused on his business. The silence was heavy, but Aminata knew she had to find an excuse. She broke the ice by talking about school, her plans, and the upcoming exams. However, her parents were far from being fooled. Fatoumata suddenly put down her cup of tea, her eyes locking onto Aminata. "Aminata," she said firmly, "where were you last night? We noticed you were a bit quieter than usual this morning." Aminata hesitated for a moment. She felt trapped, her heart pounding. "I was just at the library, Mom. I was studying for my exams," she replied in a voice she hoped sounded convincing. But Fatoumata, almost imperceptibly, pressed her lips together. "Really? You know, Aminata, we trust what you tell us, but something tells me it wasn't the library." Her mother's gaze didn't leave her face. Aminata lowered her eyes. She knew she couldn't keep lying forever. Omer, in a colder tone, intervened. "You are grown now, Aminata, but your behavior must always reflect the values of this family. We cannot tolerate you acting like a child without rules." That was the last straw. Aminata abruptly stood up from the table. "You don't understand. You don't know what it feels like to be suffocated in this house. You don't understand what I'm going through," she shouted before storming out of the room. Fatoumata and Omer exchanged a worried look, but neither of them got up to follow her. Aminata ran outside, into the heat of the day, aimless, directionless. Her thoughts swirled in her head. She felt like she was suffocating. She wanted to escape, but where? She felt lost, searching for something or someone. That's when she spotted Boubacar in the distance, sitting under a tree, a familiar figure. He noticed her immediately and stood up to meet her. His warm gaze instantly calmed the storm inside Aminata. "You look lost," he said softly, "like you need to talk." Aminata sat next to him. "I can't breathe, Boubacar. My parents, they control me. They don't let me do anything. I'm a prisoner in that house, and last night was the only time I felt free." Boubacar looked at her, understanding the depth of her words. "You know, freedom is never given. Sometimes you have to take it, even if it means breaking a few rules. But there's always a price to pay." Aminata turned her face toward him, her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "I know, but I don't want to be the girl my parents want me to be anymore. I want to live, Boubacar. Truly live." He gently took her hand. "Then maybe you'll have to make some difficult choices. But you won't be alone. I'll be here." Boubacar's words warmed her, but a deep fear took hold of her. What she felt for him was no longer just admiration, it was something stronger. She knew her choices would take her further away from the life she had known, but she didn't have the strength to turn back. In the days that followed, Aminata found herself at a crossroads. Every conversation with Boubacar seemed to pull her further away from her family and everything she had ever known. The dilemma grew. Continue living under her parents' watchful eyes or embrace this new life that awaited her, even if it meant facing it alone. But fate didn't give her time to think. One afternoon, as she was leaving school, Aminata spotted a familiar figure in the distance, a piercing, authoritative gaze. It was Fatoumata, her mother. Her dark eyes fixed on her with a coldness that sent shivers down Aminata's spine. "You thought I wouldn't find out? You thought you could hide this from me?" Fatoumata said, her voice laced with controlled anger. "You went to that party, didn't you? Tell me, why didn't you talk to me about this?" Aminata's breath caught in her throat.
"Mom, I'm sorry."
"I just wanted—" Fatoumata cut her off sharply.
No.
"You don't want to understand, do you? Is this how you repay us after everything we've done for you? You're about to taste reality?" Aminata felt her heart tighten. She knew confrontation was inevitable, but she hadn't expected it to be this brutal. Her mother grabbed her arm and dragged her home. The tension in the air was suffocating. "You think you can have it all, don't you? That you can do whatever you want? But there are rules, Aminata, and you will face them." After her confrontation with her mother, Aminata retreated to her room. The room was dark, but her mind was racing. She lay on her bed, clutching her pillow as tears streamed down her cheeks. The night was long, filled with memories of her love for Boubacar and fear of the future. The questions looped in her mind. What will become of me? Will Boubacar stand by my side? What will my parents say? By morning, though exhausted and nervous, Aminata forced herself to go to school. In class, she tried to focus, but a strange sensation washed over her. A sudden wave of nausea made her rush outside. Once there, she vomited, her heart pounding. The curious stares of students and teachers only worsened her distress. Once she recovered, she headed home, but on the way, she stopped at a pharmacy. With trembling hands, she bought a pregnancy test. At home, alone in her room, she took the test. When the result appeared positive, she froze, staring at it. The reality hit her like a storm. "I'm pregnant." A wave of fear and despair crashed over her. The next day, Aminata met Boubacar in a quiet corner of the city. She told him the news, her voice shaking. Boubacar remained silent for a moment, visibly shocked. But he took a deep breath and spoke firmly. "I'll take responsibility. I will never let you go through this alone." His reassurance comforted Aminata, but she knew the trials ahead would be immense. 2 months later, the news reached Aminata's mother. Furious, she confronted her daughter in front of her father, Omar. The tension in the house was suffocating. Omar, enraged, questioned Aminata with a chilling sternness. Under pressure, she finally admitted she was pregnant and that Boubacar was the father. Omar, beside himself with anger, demanded to meet Boubacar. They went to the young man's house. As soon as they arrived, Omar grabbed Boubacar by the arm, accusing him of dishonoring his family, and dragged him to the police station, where he had him arrested. At home, Aminata desperately pleaded with her father to release the father of her child. But Omar was furious. He immediately slapped her, removed his belt, and began beating her, shouting words of rage. "You have shamed my name and our family's honor." Struck, Aminata was so angry after this event because she was deeply hurt by it. That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat in her room, thinking. The best idea that came to her mind was to steal her father's money. She took a large sum and wrote a letter, leaving it in the living room. In the letter, she stated that she was leaving and that no one would ever see her again. She went to the police station and paid for Omar's release. Once he was free, they decided to leave. They traveled far away to a very distant village. On their journey, they crossed a dense and vast forest. While climbing a mountain, Aminata suddenly felt pain in her stomach. In the middle of the forest, she began bleeding. Within minutes, blood was running down her legs. Boubacar didn't know what to do. In a panic, he carried her on his back. After walking a few more meters, they finally reached a village just beyond the forest. Fortunately, experienced women in the village quickly recognized the seriousness of Aminata's condition. They warned Boubacar that she was in critical condition and needed immediate care. They instructed him to go into the forest to find medicinal plants to treat Aminata, who is now the future mother of his child. Desperate to save her, Boubacar ran into the forest to gather the remedies while the wise women worked to deliver the baby. A few minutes later, the baby was born. But sadly, Aminata had lost consciousness. The newborn was there, but Aminata remained in a coma for 2 days. People in the village began to wonder if she was dead or still alive. Some villagers told Boubacar to bury her, as she appeared lifeless, but he refused. He insisted that his wife was still alive. One day, while crying beside Aminata, lying on her, he saw her fingers move. He immediately ran to find the village doctor. The doctor came, prepared a medicinal dose, and administered it. 30 minutes later, Aminata regained consciousness. Boubacar was overwhelmed with joy. They remained in the village, and the villagers decided to celebrate. Their child was a beautiful baby boy. They were given a house where they could live and start their family. 3 years later, they had a second child, a beautiful baby girl. Meanwhile, Aminata's father had searched everywhere for her, but couldn't find her. However, he eventually heard whispers about where his daughter might be. He decided to go see her, accompanied by his wife. When he arrived, he was in shock to see how much his daughter had grown. Overcome with emotion, Omar asked for his daughter's forgiveness. Because parental love is strong, Aminata forgave her father. Omar also apologized to Boubacar, and they all reconciled. The family celebrated their reunion, marking the beginning of a life filled with joy and forgiveness.